Hey scholars, it's Mrs. Gregerson. I am so excited to help you learn factoring right now. I'm going to teach you a very quick way of factoring. It takes maybe a little bit of time to get used to it. Some of you know this. You're going to think this is so much fun and so easy. But I want to remind you a little bit what factoring does. What factoring is what you're doing is instead of multiplying numbers together and simplifying, I'm going backwards. So for instance, remember what we do if we had a problem like this. 2x plus 3 times x plus 5, okay? In order to multiply that together, we FOIL. And remember that's multiplying the two first ones together, and I get 2x squared. Remember, x times x is x squared. And then I do the outside two together, and I get a positive 10x, making sure I'm watching my signs. My two inside together, I get plus 3x. And then the last two together, because I'm just distributing, plus 15. And then I combine like terms. I simplified. And I get 2x squared plus 13x plus 15. All right? So that's multiplying. When I factor, I'm trying to get back to what I started with. So we're breaking it down to its parts, kind of like the idea of prime factorization when you were younger. So I'm going to talk to you mainly today about quadratics, which is 3 terms. But I do want to remind you the number one thing you have to do when you factor. The number one thing you have to remember to do is take out the greatest common factor, or what we call here in America GCF. So with the greatest common factor, you always look at any of these. When I say factor, I look at this one like right here, 9x minus 12y. I go, is there a variable or is there a number I can factor out of both? Well, I look at this one and I see a 9x minus 12y. So I look at both terms and I'm like, no variable can come out. I don't have something that's the same. But I can take out the largest, the greatest factor out of that 9 and 12 have in common a 3. So I pull out a 3. So I kind of undistribute. Remember, I'm breaking it to its parts, and I get 3 times the quantity, 3x minus 4y. Now, that's not hard. Most of you are like, that's pretty easy. And you're totally correct. So now I'm going to do the same thing with this binomial. And I say, okay, can I take variables out? And notice I have an x and y's in both parts. So I do go, okay, yeah, there is a greatest common factor. Here's how you work with variables. You look at your 2, or 3 or 4, or how many terms you have, and you say, okay, what's the smallest of all of them? Because that's the biggest one you can take out of every single term. So I take out a y, and then I look, okay, because I look at y and y squared. And then I look at my x cubed and x squared. Well, what's the smallest of the two of these? My x squared, so the x squared comes out. Then you always look at your numbers. 2 and 3, no common factors but 1, so what's the point of writing that down? And then I put my parentheses. So I factored out, so I undistributed, and I would end up having a 3x minus 2y. So that would be a completely factored problem. So those are my factors. Now that was the first thing, and always the number one thing you should look at when you are factoring. So now I'm going to look at when we're working with trinomials, or as we call in mathematics world, quadratics. Don't ask me why. There's a squared and we call it a quad. We just go with it, okay? And I'm actually going to use a method called logical guess and check is what I call it. I call it the fastest way of factoring. But the number one thing you need to remember, even when you're looking at trinomials, is you first always look for a greatest common factor. Now, and again, we need to also remember that most quadratics are going to factor into 2 binomials. So remember, like up here, here's my quadratic. I totally factored it. It would have 2 binomials multiplied together to get it. So I'm going to go back with that. And the first thing you have to do is look at your addition and subtraction signs with your quadratic and know what addition and subtraction signs you should put in your parentheses. So I call them the operation signs. I have a good friend of mine who says when you have quadratics, you always frame it. You know you're going to get your 2, most of the time, your 2 binomials. So you always put your 2 parentheses down first. So then I look at this and I say, okay, the number one thing you look at is the sign in front of your constant value. Here it's a positive. If it is positive, that means both of your signs on the inside of your parentheses have to be the same. Why? Because 2 negatives multiplied together is a positive, and 2 positives multiplied together are going to be positive. So I look here and say, all right, they're both the same sign. I look at the previous one and I see it's an addition sign. So that means inside I put 2 addition signs. Quick, easy memorization with that. So then I look at the next one. I go here, I have an addition sign again. So they're both, again, the same sign. What sign do you see there? Both, what? I see a negative sign. So that means both on the inside, they're both going to be negative with each other. Now, again, quick remind what something like that would look like. How if I did something like this? If I do FOIL, I get x squared, outside negative 2x, inside negative 3x, last a positive 6. Oh, look. Positive and negative in front. What did I start with? 2 negatives. So that's how that works. So then I look at the next one, and this is where it's so easy. If you see a subtraction sign here, you automatically think different signs inside your parentheses. You can put in the minus plus. It doesn't matter which set you put where. We can change signs and stuff later. Again, doesn't matter here. I still got a plus and a minus. So if you can memorize that, you've already got one of the very logical steps that you have to do. And then the next thing when you do, factoring this method, you logically guess and check factors of A and C. So remember, A and C is the coefficient in front of x squared, and C is my last term. That's the F and the L of FOILing, okay, is really what I'm looking for. Then you always have to check your answers, and you want to make sure there are no common factors inside the parentheses. So what I mean by check your answers, we will always OI. We'll do the outside inside of FOILing in our heads, so that way we know if we logically guess the right things. Because here's the key. I'm going to pick numbers I know that work for A and C. So I'm going to check OI to make sure it works. Now, also another thing to remember, factoring is not solving an equation. I'm not solving for a variable. There should be no equal signs. No equal signs, okay? So let's do a couple together. And let's see how it goes. Let's see if you guys get started. A lot of you are pretty bright with this, so I have a feeling you're going to have any problems following along. So, first of all, I just asked, here's the directions. Factor completely. That's all I'm asking, just factor. So break it into its parts. So I look at this and go, oh, look, it's a trinomial. First thing I look for, is there a greatest common factor? And there is no one number or variable I can pull from all 3 terms. I'm done. So the next thing you do is I'm going to put my framework, my 2 sets of parentheses up. And then I'm like asking myself, what signs do I put in there? So I look here at the end, and that means both the same, right? Now, I look at the one in front. They're both going to be what? Addition. So I have addition, addition. Now, this problem I love with my whole heart, because the moment you see here, it's understood to be a 1. This is going to be a very easy factoring problem, because right away, my first one I know I'm going to get is an x and an x. So I have x and x, so as x times x is x squared. Then all I have to do is look at the end, 10. And I'll go, what are the factors of 10 that I know? 1 and 10, 2 and 5. And this is what you ask yourself. What 2 factors of 10 do I multiply together but add together to be 7? And you'd all say, because you're really bright people, 2 and 5. Now, I asked you to check to see if you factored this completely, because first of all, I double checked no greatest common factors. I did a good job with that earlier. So I do outside. Oh, look, that's a positive 5x. Inside, a positive 2x. What does that add up to? 7x. Guys, did we do it correctly? There is your completely factored form of that trinomial. Took no time whatsoever. Let's do one more. Again, I look at this. Let me let you see that first one there. And I go, okay, I have a trinomial, greatest common factor. There's no greatest common factor. Check. Great. So the very next step, put your 2 sets of parentheses down. We're going to assume it's factorable, so we go ahead and do that. And then I say, okay, with this, I need to look at my signs again. There's a subtraction sign there, and without having to think too hard about it, I know my 2 signs are going to be different. So right away, I go a plus and a minus. Could you go minus plus? And the answer is, hello, yes. Okay, I don't care which one you put first. Now, with that, again, I look at my a, which is 1. This makes this very easy for me. So I just put a 1x and a 1x down. So again, I am just looking at my last term, which is a negative 8. Now, here's the question you ask yourself again. What two numbers multiply together to be 8, but the difference of the two of them is 2? So I have here, I got 8. Oh, let me write it this way. Make it a little bit easier. I have 8. I get 1 and 8, 2 and 4. Now, obviously, the difference of 1 and 8 is 7. The difference of 2 and 4 is what? 2. Now, I plug them in. I go 4 and 2. Now, those of you who are really good at factoring just screamed at me because you're like, you put it in the wrong spot. Now, for those of you who don't know how to factor well, you're like, why are they upset with you? Here's why. Look when I FOIL. I get here a negative 2x. Inside, I get a positive 4x. What does that add together to give me? A positive 2x. What do I have here? A negative sign. So with that negative sign, that means I put them in the wrong locations. You do not factor without a pencil. Now, if it's perfectly the opposite of what I want, I'm kind of lazy. I just sit there, I erase my sign, I put that as a negative, and I make that one addition. And look how quick this changes for checking. Outside is a positive 2x. Inside's a negative 4x. Oh, look, what do we get? A negative 2x. You now have factored that completely. I got the quantity x minus 4 times quantity x plus 2. Or you could like switch the two sets of parentheses around. But that's how you factor it. There's no greatest common factors in my binomials. I know I did a very good job of getting that. But you guys know as well as I do, we don't always have a 1 in the coefficient, the A spot of a quadrilateral. We have problems like C. All of a sudden, a lot of your hearts went, ugh, this is horrible. It's no longer easy. Guys, but it is with this method, okay? But it is. Let me work with you on this. First, I look for greatest common factor. No single number or single variable can come out of all 3 spots. So with that, I now skip to my signs. It is a negative at the end, so that's different signs. So I'm going to go plus, minus. Now, this is where it's a little bit trickier, because remember on the previous page, I'm going to flip it over, I said you have to worry about the factors of A and C. So now I have an A that's bigger than 1. So A here is 3. What are my factors of 3? I love it when it's simple. 1 and 3. You're totally correct. So I'm going to put for one of these, I'm going to put a 3x, and I'm going to put an x. Now, I don't know which one to put where, so I'm just putting them down. Erasers do amazing things if we want to change it. So then I go, okay, we're back to 8 again. And we know factors of 8 are 1 and 8, 2 and 4. Now, when I look at this, I go, okay, what do I do? Which one do I pick? And my comment is, you pick the one you want to try first. No, I'm probably not going to try 1 and 8. It is used that way, but I use the ones that are done most of the time in common. So the first thing I'm going to do again, and on purpose I'm doing this wrong. Guys, I can do this in my head very quickly. So for me, doing it wrong is like a killer. But I'm going to put the 4 here and the 2 here. And now this is where you check. This is the logical guess and check. I look at this and I go a negative 6x inside positive 4x. That gives me a positive 2x. Did I logically put these in a good location? And obviously I didn't get a positive 10x. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to erase this stuff. And I'm going to go, okay, I'm not giving up on 4 and 2 yet. I'm switching spots. So then I'm going to do my outside. And I get a 12x. I check my inside. Oops, a negative 12x. Let me make sure I do that. Inside, a positive 2x. And then I get a negative 10x. Now, those of you who remember factoring really well, you realize that's exactly the opposite of what I need. If it's exactly the opposite of what you need, all you have to do is change the signs inside your parentheses. This one needs to become addition. This one needs to become subtraction. Again, look what happens when I do that. I love math. This is so much fun. Outside, 12x. Inside, a negative 2x. I get a positive 10x. Woot woot! We got it right. Oh yeah. I love it. And really, when you get used to doing these, it actually becomes really, really, really fast. We have one more video. I want to stop this video here to give us time to let my computer will load quicker that way. But let's go here and let's go and do about 4 more together to hopefully give you guys some confidence. And then I want you guys to try this. If you are struggling with this, you need to remember one big thing. You've got to get help, because when they go to college algebra next year, they will review this with you and they'll maybe take 1 or 2 days at most, and they expect you to be really, really good. I would rather you go to college algebra, especially coming from me, and you are like more than really good. You're amazing at this because it makes your life a lot easier next year. So hold on, make sure you go and you watch the second video.